So we're going to start with the bunny cactus, and I'm first painting the body by outlining the shape and then filling it in with color, but also leaving a little bit of white space. Now I'm doing one of the arms with a slightly darker color. It'll create a nice contrast. And if your color starts to run like that, I try not to worry about it too much. They usually end up drying really nicely and adding some cool gradients and color variation. And then while it's still wet, I'm dabbing in darker color, and this will create a lot of contrast and give our cactus volume. Now I've chosen to paint in 3 arms, but you can vary it and do more or less. And certain elements you can really play around with to bring out a different character. For example, you can adjust the size and angle of the arms and see how it creates a different personality and one that matches your style. And remember, you can always adjust while the paint is still wet. And here you can see I'm lifting color by drying my brush and then picking up some of that paint. And this comes in handy if we forgot to add a highlight or we accidentally covered them up. And now let's paint our pot. And I've just grabbed a black, dark grayish color and I've outlined it and then taken some water to pull out some of the color. And you can see we have some light areas and dark areas, and this also contributes to creating a sense of volume. Now in the space that we carved out, we can add in our dirt. And I like to do this before the pot completely dries. That way we can get some nice color blends. You can paint the dirt to meet up at the body. And if it's still wet, you can let the colors blend or dry your brush off and pick up some of that excess water. Try both ways, see which one you prefer. If you like that kind of messy, painterly feel, or maybe you prefer a more clean look. I don't know. Try both. And just like we did with the body of the cactus, I'm lifting color in parts of the pot with a dry brush. The last step is to add detail, but we want to make sure that everything is dry. And so you can see there's a bit of shine. So let's let this dry and then come back. For the shadow, I have a little bit of water on my brush and I'm just running it along the bottom of our pot. So it'll pick up some of that color that we already have and fade as you drag your brush. Now let's move on to some details, and I'm using a smaller brush to drop in little blue dots. And you don't have to be too precise, the more random the better. And adding whites is really something I like to include in my illustrations, so you can use a white gel pen and throw in some white dots as well. Now you can call this cactus done, or since our pot is kind of dark, we can add a decorative element. So this here is white gouache, and I'm adding in basic shapes like rectangles, circles, and dashes. And just be creative, add your own designs. And that's our bunny cactus. For this next cactus, we are working in a circular shape and dividing it up into 4 sections. And to the far left, you want to paint a C shape, and then next to it, kind of flatten it out a little bit and follow the curve of the circle. And you can vary the color to make it a little bit more visually interesting. So I made it a little bit darker. So those are 3 sections, and the last one, it's just going to be another C shape. And you can let the colors blend towards the top. And now I've just grabbed a yellow to paint the base of a flower. And this is just going to be an upside down triangle. And for the blooms, you can grab any color. I chose red, and I'm outlining a kind of floppy star shape and then reserving the middle of it for a different color. And then you can just repeat it on the other side. And now for the pot, I like to use that dry on wet technique. So I'm putting down a pretty strong color, very little water, and then outlining the outer edges. And I'm rinsing my brush slightly, grabbing some water, and spreading the color, pulling it out so you get that nice highlighted section. And while it's still wet, you can go ahead and kind of dab in the dirt. And then you can go ahead and use that same dirt color to fill in that circle we left in the flower. Creates a little harmony when you repeat the same colors. And then adding a little bit of shadow on one side of the petal bases. And now if you want, you can ground the cactus by adding a drop shadow. And to do that, I just wet my brush and just touching the bottom part of the pot, dragging out some of that color that's already there. And what's great about exploration and art is you can decide when your painting is done. So if you want, you can leave it as it is or continue to layer once it's completely dry. And I think it's also important to remember not to judge your work too early and let things develop. So I'm taking a look at the pot and it looks like there was a little bit too much water, so it dried a little funny. But that's okay, we can just adjust. And I'm doing that by adding another layer of paint and then blending it to make the transition a little bit smoother. Don't worry too much if it doesn't look like you want it to look on the first pass. You can always find ways to adjust it, or you can just paint another one. Now let's add in some detail work with a white gel pen. And you can use any design really. It can match up with the previous cactus that you did, or have a completely different theme and be in a separate illustration. It's really all up to you. And so by using a variety of colors and shapes and combining them with detail work, we have a fun, vibrant cactus. And now let's paint the saguaro. And for this one, it's really all about water ratio and controlling how much is on the brush. And you can get really beautiful gradients by adjusting how much water you use. So I'm being very light with my color and wiping it off in certain areas and then adding back. So overall, you'll see that it has a more delicate look. And you can drop in color wherever you choose, but I like to place them usually on the edges and where any connecting pieces are, so where the arm meets the body. And by doing that, you're defining different sections and it doesn't end up looking like one big blob. It's really neat because you can see, especially when it dries, all the textures that you can get. And it's a combination of the paint, the water, and the paper. So hopefully you can start seeing that you've created a lot of depth by having some areas appear as if they're in shadow and some areas in light. So you might either really love this style or not, but as you practice it, you'll figure out when it's best to use. If you gravitate more towards that three-dimensional, kind of realistic, not so flat look, this is a great technique to use. And now for this pot, I decided to go with a lighter color because I wanted to add detail with a slightly darker watercolor rather than relying on a white gel pen. And again, leaving some space for the dirt that we're going to paint in. And you can do this while it's still wet or when it's dry. Actually, you should just try both and see which one you like. I kind of like it when the colors blend together. It's a little bit more unpredictable, but also more fun. And now just dragging out the shadow at the base of the pot. We can stay as is, or we can take it another step further. And here I am outlining it in a darker green all along the arms and the edges of the body. So he really sticks out. And then adding curved lines to show the ribs of the cactus. Just another decorative element you can add. And they don't have to be completely straight. Some of the lines will be a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner. And then finally adding the little needles, quick dashes in random spots wherever you like. And our pot is looking a little bare, so I've grabbed that same dirt color and adding a little bit of design right on top, making sure that everything is dry. That way the colors don't get muddy and the colors are vibrant. So again, this cactus is focused on color, but using it in different stages. So we have our base that starts off kind of light and then gradually building it up with our details. So let's paint one more saguaro. And here I want to show how we can paint basically the same subject, but approach it in a slightly different way, still using color. Rather than the conventional green, I've decided for a blue, so it makes it a little bit more whimsical. And I'm still using the dry on wet technique, but using a ton of water to kind of push the color around, and it creates again that soft, delicate look. And then you can outline the shape of the arm, place it wherever you want to place it, and then go ahead and fill it in. And you can see this arm, I used a slightly darker blue, and so you get a lot of a variation. And then a piece sticking out at the top. And then where it meets the body, just dabbing in a touch of color. And you probably noticed I didn't paint it in fully. There are spots where I let the white of the paper shine through, and that really helps to make things pop as well. So try to leave those little gaps. Unlike the previous pot that we painted where we started off with a lot of paint, this one I'm using a ton more of the water, and you can immediately see the difference. It creates a different mood. And then just dropping in color here and there, but not too much that it creates a puddle. And now with some dirt color, I'm adding it in, touching it ever so slightly to the top of the pot to encourage a little bit of the colors to blend together. And if you like that style, you have to work a little bit quickly, but if you'd rather wait, you can also do that and paint in the dirt when everything is dry. And rather than the typical shadow, you can actually outline the shape of the cactus body and the arms, and that just adds a little bit more character to the illustration. And you can stop there, or you can go ahead and add details. I mean, that's what I enjoy most. That's what my eyes tend to look for when I'm looking at an illustration. And if you really want to be wild, you can add some fun splatters all around. And that's where I just have a little bit of water and paint on my brush and I'm just tapping. Tap, tap.